This is Always Outnumbered, Always Outgunned, chapter The Wanderer, section 1. When Socrates Fortwell was released from prison, he ran just as if he had gone over the wall. To go over the wall means to escape from prison. There was no family that wanted to take him in. That means to see him. There were no old friends except for other men who had been released from prison and now lived in the shadows of Indianapolis, Gary, and Chicago. They paid Socrates $1,232.63 for his 27 years behind bars. He put the money in his pocket and took a bus to Los Angeles. He had 3 reasons to go there. The first was that even though he had been born and half raised on a farm, he no longer knew the country. He couldn't live the slow, rural life, and so he needed a city. His second reason for escaping west was that the prison he'd come from was drafty and cold. The only cold he wanted from that day on was chill in the $1,000 worth of beer that he planned to imbibe. To imbibe means to drink. He learned in prison that LA or Los Angeles was a big, rambling bunch of towns, and that everybody was in too much of a hurry to remember faces, places, times, and events. To ramble means to move around a lot, just to move from one place to the other without purpose. And what he's saying here is that Los Angeles is a lot of little towns that grew together without organization, and this is true. An ex-con would need that kind of anonymity. Anonymity means that no one knows who you are. And so he got on a Greyhound, hunched over, sullen and silent, like some kind of fugitive. A Greyhound is a type of bus. It's a big bus that's used for long distances. Hunched over means to be bent over. Sullen means to be kind of upset. Silent, like some kind of fugitive. A fugitive is a person who's running away from something. He ran as far as California, and then he burrowed in, hating every policeman, every clerk's glance, and every footstep behind him. To burrow means to dig underground, so it's like he's hiding. He ran because he knew that in Indiana the cops would know him. If they knew him, they'd try to bring him in every now and then. To bring a person in means to take him to jail. And if anyone tried to put him in a cell again, he would try his best to kill them. Socrates Fortwell was running for his life. Within a week of his release from prison, 8 years ago, Socrates had his first fight. He was confronted, or attacked, in the alley that passed his door, by a bulky, large young man named Charles Rinnett. Charles, trying to impress his grinning friends, had claimed that Socrates was an old, dumpster-diving, rag-picking, homeless man. Socrates was only 50 at the time, and even though he was more than twice the age of Charles, he convinced the young man by argument and a strong hand that he wasn't homeless and that he had never eaten from the garbage. "Sometimes a broken nose is all you young boys understand," Socrates said while standing over the man, the heckler. A heckler is someone who makes fun of someone. He'd knocked Charles to the ground 3 times before the young man got the idea to stay down. The young men around them stopped laughing at Socrates and started making fun of their friend. Charles never spoke to Socrates after that day. He grew older and more somber or quiet, dark, and could be seen now and then collecting bottles and cans on the streets of Watts. Socrates watched Charles for all those years as he turned meaner and shabbier. Shabby means to be not well put together. If he could have, Socrates would have told Charles that he was sorry for breaking his nose, that he was just recently out of the jail, penitentiary, when they had their fight. In the penitentiary, you had to hurt somebody in your first few days on the block because you had to show that you weren't a punk. This means that when you first arrive at jail, you have to hurt someone so that people will know that you're tough. A fight was no more than a housewarming in the joint. A housewarming is when you get a new home, maybe throw a party and people bring you gifts. And the joint is another word for prison. Sometimes, as the years passed, Socrates would have imaginary talks with Charles. He'd ask the yellow-eyed sloucher why he stayed around those same old streets. Why are you out here acting like a hoodlum child when you are a man who should be making something of yourself? A hoodlum means a criminal. Socrates mouthed the words silently on the bus coming home from his new job at Bounty's supermarket. "And what are you doing that's so special, old man?" the Charles in Socrates' mind responded. "You live in that rat hole and take the bus to your store every day. What are you making? What are you doing?" "I have a job, man," Socrates whispered. "I get up and I go to work. I get a paycheck. I have a bank account." The lady sitting in front of Socrates got up. At first he thought that she was getting off, but then she just changed seats. He put his fingers to his lips and concentrated on keeping quiet. But then his mental friend said, "You're just like me, Socrates, for, well, you're down on the bottom of the white man's ladder right next to me. I can't go anywhere, and you can't either." "I can too," Socrates said loudly. "I can go wherever I please." No one turned around to see what Socrates was talking about, but they heard him. They could have testified to his vow. So this is Socrates, and he's talking to himself on the bus. And when people on the bus talk to themselves, it makes people a little nervous. And that's why the woman got up and left. Section 2. The very next Saturday morning, Socrates got on a bus headed for Santa Monica. The big blue bus was empty except for him and the driver, a black woman who liked to talk. "Yup, all my kids are down in Atlanta," the driver said. "You know colored people are always on the move, always trying to get somewhere fast. I told them they might as well stay here. I told them that what you have to do, is make a stand somewhere. But they don't listen. They say that that no one's giving black people a chance here. Shoot, I'm not asking anyone to give me a thing. No one gives you anything now, do they, mister?" "Well," Socrates said, "they might give you one thing." "Oh," said the driver, "what's that?" "A good kick in the pants." That got the driver laughing. She laughed so hard that Socrates was afraid she'd run the red light they were approaching. To run a red light means to go through a stoplight that is red when you should stop. But she didn't. The brake trumpeted like a bull elephant and the bus swayed to a halt, giving Socrates the feeling that he was riding inside a great wave. "What are you doing out here today?" the driver asked. "Do you work out here?" "I come out here because I wanted to," Socrates answered. "You don't have to spend your whole life living in a cave like some caveman. I want to see the ocean. I've been in Los Angeles for 8.5 years, and I haven't seen the ocean once." "Well, at least you know it," the driver said, sneering with the satisfaction of the truth. That's what's wrong with so many people. Here they have the world right out in front of them, and they complain that there isn't anything that they can do. I'm with you. Pay your fare and see what's what. That means do what you can and go explore the world. Socrates got off the bus at Lincoln and Pico. He wandered around that neighborhood until he happened upon the big blue ocean. There was a ribbon of sidewalk running down the beach, about 100 yards from the water. Near-naked men and women with good bodies traveled up and down the pedestrian road by walking and running, by blade skates and bicycle. There were skateboarders and surfers and men and women in wetsuits. Everybody seemed hard at work at their recreation. Recreation means their fun, their relaxation. Socrates was reminded of the prison yard. A prison yard is where the prisoners go to get their recreation, their time off. He had the feeling he'd get when he was let out of solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is where they put the prisoners who are maybe misbehaving. The yard was a wonderful place after a few weeks in the icebox. The icebox is another word for solitary confinement. There was sunlight in the company of men. There were weights and checkers and magazines and talk. He was still in jail, but he had the feeling of freedom after being let out of the punishment box. Even jail could feel good if they let you stretch your legs and squint at the sun every once in a while. To squint is what we do with our eyes when the light is really bright. We close our eyes a little bit to shade our eyes. The sun was hard and strong on the beach that day. Socrates took off his shoes and socks and put them in the pockets of his army jacket. Then he took off the jacket and hung or slung it over his shoulder. There were hardly any people down near the water. A few joggers, just as many dogs. At the shoreline the surf was loud. The surf is the water. It boomed and hissed and sang in a chorus of drowning bells. The sound was everything down near the water. The whole world was the blue god's song. God isn't anywhere near here, child, Socrates' aunt, Belandra Beaufort, used to say. He's 1,000,000 miles away, out in the middle of an ocean somewhere. And he isn't white like they say he is either. God's black? Little Socrates asked the tall, skinny woman. He was sitting in her lap. Naw, baby, she said sadly, he isn't black. If he was, there wouldn't be all this mess down here with us. Nah, God's blue. Blue? Uh-huh. Blue like the ocean. Blue. Sad and cold and far away, like the sky is far and blue. You have to go a long, long way to get to God. And even if you get there, he might not say a thing. Not a thing. Socrates walked for miles on the curving beaches. The surface of the sand was hot from the sun, but cool when his foot sank to the layer of moisture below. So moisture is wetness. He went north past Malibu, on toward the blue of the water and sky. He stayed close to the ocean, remembering his aunt's sermons or speeches about how God was always beyond reach, but how people were always trying to get there. Men aren't ever satisfied with what is, and that's why there's only 1 out of 100 that's happy. He ate 3 bananas and a peanut butter and jam sandwich from his pockets. The soft sand, the wind, and the wild seas made him feel as if he were staggering under some angry god's rage. The sun rose high and was hot on his head, but a cold wind tore off the waters and chilled his bones. Socrates knew that Charles Rinnet had never been this far. Not on his own, not sober, not with his eyes open. Out of the icebox, he said to himself, and into the sea.